Holy Father were to order him to set sail in the first bark which he might find in the port of Ostia near Rome, and to abandon himself to the sea without a mast, without sails, without oars or rudder or any of the things that are needful for navigation or subsistence, he would obey not only with alacrity, but without anxiety or repugnance, and even with a great internal satisfaction." Close quote. With a solitary concrete example of the extravagance to which the virtue we are considering has been carried, I will pass to the topic next in order. Quote, "Sister Marie Claire of Port Royal had been greatly imbued with the holiness and excellence of M. de Langres. This prelate, soon after he came to Port Royal, said to her one day, seeing her so tenderly attached to Mother Angelique, that it would perhaps be better not to speak to her again. Marie Claire, greedy of obedience, took this inconsiderate word for an oracle of God, and from that day forward remained for several years without once speaking to her sister." Close quote. Our next topic will be poverty, felt at all times and under all creeds as one adornment of a saintly life. Since the instinct of ownership is fundamental in man's nature, this is one more example of the ascetic paradox. Yet it appears no paradox at all, but perfectly reasonable, the moment one recollects how easily higher excitement holds lower cupidities in check. Having just quoted the Jesuit Rodriguez on the subject of obedience, I will, to give immediately a concrete turn to our discussion of poverty, also read you a page from his chapter on this latter virtue. You must remember that he is writing instructions for monks of his own order and bases them all on the text, "Blessed are the poor in spirit." He says, quote, "If any one of you will know whether or not he is really poor in spirit, let him consider whether he loves the ordinary consequences and effects of poverty, which are hunger, thirst, cold, fatigue, and the denudation of all conveniences. See if you are glad to wear a worn-out habit full of patches. See if you are glad when something is lacking to your meal, when you are passed by in serving it, when what you receive is distasteful to you, when your cell is out of repair. If you are not glad of these things, if, instead of loving them, you avoid them, then there is proof that you have not attained the perfection of poverty of spirit." Close quote. Rodriguez then goes on to describe the practice of poverty in more detail. Quote, "The first point is that which Saint Ignatius proposes in his Constitutions when he says, 'Let no one use anything as if it were his private possession.' He says, 'A religious person ought in respect to all the things that he uses to be like a statue which one may drape with clothing, but which feels no grief and makes no resistance when one strips it again. It is in this way that you should feel towards your clothes, your books, your cell, and everything else that you make use of, if ordered to quit them or to exchange them for others, have no more sorrow than if you were a statue being uncovered. In this way you will avoid using them as if they were your private possession. But if, when you give up your cell, or yield possession of this or that object, or exchange it for another, you feel repugnance and are not like a statue, that shows that you view these things as if they were your private property. And this is why our holy founder wished the superiors to test their monks somewhat as God tested Abraham, and to put their poverty and their obedience to trial, that by this means they may become acquainted with the degree of their virtue, and gain a chance to make ever farther progress in perfection, making the one move out of his room when he finds it comfortable and is attached to it, taking away from another a book of which he is fond, or obliging a third to exchange his garment for a worse one. Otherwise we should end by acquiring a species of property in all these several objects, and little by little the wall of poverty that surrounds us and constitutes our principal defense would be thrown down. The ancient fathers of the desert used often thus to treat their companions. Saint Dositheus, being sick nurse, desired a certain knife, and asked Saint Dorotheus for it, not for his private use, but for employment in the infirmary of which he had charge. Whereupon Saint Dorotheus answered him, "Ha, Dositheus, so that knife pleases you so much? Will you be the slave of a knife, or the slave of Jesus Christ? Do you not blush with shame at wishing that a knife should be your master? I will not let you touch it." Which reproach and refusal had such an effect upon the holy disciple that since that time he never touched the knife again. Close quote. Father Rodriguez continues, quote, "Therefore, in our rooms there must be no other furniture than a bed, a table, a bench, and a candlestick, things purely necessary and nothing more. It is not allowed among us that our cells should be ornamented with pictures or aught else, neither armchairs, carpets, curtains, nor any sort of cabinet or bureau of any elegance. Neither is it allowed us to keep anything to eat, either for ourselves or for those who may come to visit us. We must ask permission to go to the refectory, even for a glass of water, and finally, we may not keep a book in which we can write a line, or which we may take away with us. We cannot deny that thus we are in great poverty. But this poverty is at the same time a great repose and a great perfection. For it would be inevitable, in case a religious person were allowed to own superfluous possessions, that these things would greatly occupy his mind, be it to acquire them, to preserve them, or to increase them. So that, in not permitting us at all to own them, all these inconveniences are remedied. Among the various good reasons why the company forbids secular persons to enter our cells, the principal one is that thus we may the easier be kept in poverty. After all, we are all men, and if we were to receive people of the world into our rooms, we should not have the strength to remain within the bounds prescribed, and should at least wish to adorn them with some books to give the visitors a better opinion of our scholarship." Close quote. Since Hindu fakirs, Buddhist monks, and Mohammedan dervishes unite with Jesuits and Franciscans in idealizing poverty as the loftiest individual state, it is worthwhile to examine into the spiritual grounds for such a seemingly unnatural opinion, and first of those which lie closest to common human nature. The opposition between the men who have and the men who are is immemorial, though the gentleman, in the good old-fashioned sense of the man who is well-born, has usually, in point of fact, been predacious and reveled in lands and goods, yet he has never identified his essence with these possessions, but rather with the personal superiorities, the courage, generosity, and pride supposed to be his birthright. To certain huckstering kinds of consideration he thanked God he was forever inaccessible, and if in life's vicissitudes he should become destitute through their lack, he was glad to think that with his sheer valor he was all the freer to work out his salvation. "Wir nur selbst was heiter," says Lessing's Tempelherr in Nathan the Wise. Mein Gott, ich habe nichts." This ideal of the well-born man without possessions was embodied in knight-errantry and Templardom, and hideously corrupted as it has always been, it still dominates sentimentally, if not practically, the military and aristocratic view of life. We glorify the soldier as the man absolutely unencumbered, owing nothing but his bare life, and willing to toss that up at any moment when the cause commands him. He is the representative of unhampered freedom in ideal directions. The laborer who pays with his person day by day and has no rights invested in the future offers also much of this ideal detachment. Like the savage, he may make his bed wherever his right arm can support him, and from his simple and athletic attitude of observation, The property owner seems buried and smothered in ignoble externalities and